everyone. We're going to be trying something a little bit different this week. So with the PowerPoint, I'm actually going to be doing a recording on top of it. So you can either choose to just power through the PowerPoint, or you can listen to the audio recorded version of it, just so I can kind of explain things a little bit more, and we'll see how that goes. So going off of what we had kind of last week, in which we were just kind of scratching the surface of kind of the concepts of what we believe is good and what we believe is bad, sort of things. Kind of the morality of everything. And something that really ties well into that is the basis of human rights. Now, oftentimes the rights we believe in are oftentimes come out of what we believe is inherently good or inherently bad. So kind of to start, just to think kind of on your own, this would usually be a discussion in class, but I just want you to kind of think about it. Think about, what do humans need to survive? What are the basis of that every single human being needs in order to survive? Not necessarily thrive, but survive. It's also important to think of the difference between wants and needs. Oftentimes our wants are things like video games or nice clothing or the kind of foods that we like. Those are not necessarily things that will keep us kind of alive, but they're like extra things kind of on top. So one of the kind of people that everyone likes to use as a reference for basic human needs is Maslow. So Maslow created this hierarchy of needs. So what he has is basically this pyramid, and you can see it on the screen here, talking about things like physiological needs, so air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction, all the basis that pretty much every living organism needs on the planet in order to be successful as a species. From there, you have obviously safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. So the basics of like kind of going just a little bit outside oneself. Then you have love and belonging. So friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. So being connected to people. Then we have esteem, so respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom. And at the top we have self-actualization, so the desire to become more than one can be. So that's striving to better oneself. The important thing about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is you have to have the stuff underneath, so you need to have the basic needs met first before the other things can be kind of met. And this was kind of Maslow's theory. And we can actually see that. Probably most of you have that feeling of, if you're very, very tired or you're really hungry, you're probably not going to be really looking into making yourself a better person because you're so focused on the fact that you're so tired or really hungry. Just some kind of foods for thought. So let's get into what are the basis for human rights. Now, human rights, before we get into kind of some of the details of what constitutes basic human rights, so these oftentimes are rights that all human beings have, regardless of gender, nationality, residency, sex, ethnicity, religion, color, other categorizations. So basically, all human beings most believe that we should have those. Now, this is definitely interesting because some people argue different types of human rights or to what extent those rights exist. But all of us have kind of this sense that every human being on the planet deserves certain basic rights. And even if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, probably most of us agree that those physiological needs everyone should at least have those. Human rights are also meant to be non-discriminatory, so that whole human beings are entitled to them and no one can be excluded from them. However, while all human beings are entitled to these, not all humans experience these equal throughout the world. And we can actually see that happening right now, based off of even the COVID-19, the fact that certain countries or certain people with wealth and status seem to be the ones who are getting tested for COVID. whereas other human beings, not so much. A good example, obviously, is the United States and what's happening there, where lots of people who have status within the society are able to get proper health care, proper testing and things, whereas many other people don't have that. So we can see, yeah, governments and individuals definitely can ignore basic human rights and obviously exploit others. So here are some of the kind of basic human rights and kind of the variety of them. So we obviously have civil rights, the right to life, liberty, security. Those are essentially kind of, if you saw in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those are your basics. You have a right to live on this planet. Then you have things like political rights, so the right for protection of the law, equality before the law, that whole, people can't just arrest you because they don't like you, like say they don't like the color of your shirt and things like that. Then we have economic rights, so the right to work, own property, receive equal pay. So obviously under this is the right to, you can choose where you work, you can apply for the job, and you have, if you have the same qualifications as other people who already have that job, you have a right to obviously apply for it, in the same way that you have a right to be paid the same amount as your coworker, provided you have the same qualifications. Then you have social rights, the right to an education, consenting marriages, things like that. Cultural rights, so the right to participate in your cultural community. So the ability, if you are practicing a certain religion, that you have a right to actually practice that religion. Now, it's also important to note that within these rights, as long as they are not infringing on somebody else's rights, they're totally fair game. And most countries have laws that say, hey, you have a right to, say, for instance, practice your religion as long as it's not infringing on somebody else's rights. Like, say your religion is, I don't know, going around and kicking puppies. That's kind of not okay. And you might argue, well, this is my right. I can go around and kick puppies. But obviously that's not the case, because you are infringing on harming an animal, things like that. Then you also have collective rights. So the right to self-determination. So to choose to pursue to be the best person that you can be. So there was a really interesting quote by Eleanor Roosevelt in 1958 about universal right. And this is kind of an interesting quote. I'll read it to you. Where, after all, do universal rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person. The neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seek equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they are little meaning anywhere. Without concerned citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. And I thought this was a really interesting quote, because if we are going to talk about basic human rights, unless we as people, individual people, actually believe in those rights, doesn't really matter what the government says. If we at our core don't believe in the rights of equality and acceptance and love and peace, if we don't believe that in our core, it doesn't really matter what the government says. Because if we don't believe in those, there's really kind of no point. It's in vain. Just kind of interesting to think about. All right, so there's going to be 2 assignments that you are going to complete for this week. One of them is the moral rules assignment, and I'll explain what that is. So for the moral rules assignment, this is kind of sort of getting into not just basic human rights, but also the stuff we talked about last week, in the basics of what is good and what is bad sort of thing. So I have a list of a bunch of different ethics and morals of kind of these really big sweeping terms. Now, this obviously isn't all of them. I just picked kind of a couple to look at. So we have things like capitalism. This usually has to do with money. Christianity, most of you know that. Fascism, I thought I'd kind of add that one in there. Feminism, so equality of the sexes. Hedonism's an interesting one. This usually has to do with pursuing of pleasure, and that everyone has a right to pursue things that are good for them, and that everyone should be working working towards having the least amount of pain in their life. Liberalism, so this is the right to be able to kind of question the government and also have a right to vote for the government that you choose for. And then socialism, which is the fact that no human being is living on this planet by themselves, and it's up to the collectiveness to work it out. You'll see bullet points on the assignment underneath that have a bunch of different sort of ethical and moral like rules for each of these. I'm not going to go through them, but if you have any questions, you can just email me. So for the assignment, what you are going to be doing is answering these two questions. I'd like you to do them in full sentences, and if we have a chance, I would actually like to talk about these this week. I'd like to schedule actually a meeting where you guys can come in and kind of chat about them. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at all those different bullet points under each of the sections. So looking under Christianity and hedonism and feminism. So look under those, and what I would like you to do is I'd like you to choose a minimum of 3 points from the list. Now, you can have multiple points from, say, capitalism. Maybe there's 2 points within capitalism that you really agree or super disagree with. I'd like you to at least have them kind of from different kind of moral and ethical groups. So don't have them all from, say, the socialism one. Like, kind of pick like maybe 1 or 2 from some of the different ones. You only need to have 3. I'm making this assignment really short. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to say, for instance, under socialism, maybe the first point you really agree with, that everyone has to collectively work together. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, so under socialism, this is the point I chose, and this is why I super agree with it, or maybe you disagree with it. So that's for the first question. For the second question, what I would like you to do is I'd like you to pick 3 different points. So don't use the same points that you did for question 1. Choose 3 different points and discuss how those points maybe apply to your life or the lives of others around you. So see if you can come up with actual examples. Now, to give you an example of this, say for instance for the one on, say, I don't have the sheet in front of me, so I'm just going off the top of my head. Say for instance for the one for socialism. That you believe and see in the world that yes, people are choosing to step up and help others even if it doesn't necessarily benefit them. That could be your example. So your second assignment that you're going to be doing this week is the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. This is a United Nations declaration. So you'll kind of see the sheets as you download it, and I'll kind of explain it. So for those of you who don't know, the UN is the United Nations. It was first created in 1945 after World War II. Basically, it kind of first started kind of as like a group of countries coming together to decide, you know what, let's maybe not have world wars again. So it was preventing major conflicts, keeping peace, and things like that. Now, you're not required to join the United Nations. There's certain countries that have joined and certain countries that haven't. So obviously, this is used as a way to hopefully help countries have a sense of, I don't know, creating some sort of peace within their nation. So there was kind of 2 declarations for human rights. There's obviously a lot more. There's now the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People as well, which we'll actually talk about in a later session. So the first one was the Declaration of the Rights of just human beings, and that was created in 1948. The one that we're going to be looking at is the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. The reason I wanted to use this one is lots of the language tends to be a little bit easier to understand. The Declaration of the Rights of Human is really kind of detailed, and you can look it up online, and some of them are like kind of hard to understand. It's also interesting, the version that I got is a simplified version of the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. Most of you will probably realize that these rights all humans kind of have, but they wanted to create a declaration that specifically looked at kind of children, because oftentimes the groups that are so easily exploited oftentimes are children, because they don't understand their rights or they don't know how to defend themselves. So your task, there's a bunch of them. I think there's 45 different sections of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. What I would like you to do is, there's a lot of them. I would like you to pick your top 5, the ones that you think are most important, kind of to you, or even to like people in your life to think about. Now, it's important to note that these, we're not saying get rid of all the rest of them. What it's saying is, okay, if you had to pare this entire declaration down to only 5 points, which ones would you choose? So you can either do that by placing a star next to them, or highlighting them, or marking them in any way, or copy and pasting them on a Word document, however you choose to do that. And what I would like to do for these 2 assignments, particularly this one, I'd like to actually have a discussion on Thursday, when our class would actually be running, so at 2 p.m. So here's to hoping that I can get that. I'll be sending out a link. You'll notice it at the bottom of the assignments page. I think we'll either be using Zoom or Google Classrooms or something like that. So I'll send you guys a link so you guys can join in and we can actually have an actual talk about this.